Yay! What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 246.
We're getting up there?
I can't believe it. We are. I can't believe 246 episodes. We felt last week like we were stuck in the 240s.
The Groundhog Day effect in the 240s.
It still feels that way because we haven't left the 240s yet.
True.
Very excited about tonight's show. We appreciate your patience. We got started a little bit later tonight because YouTube has been changing a lot of the server ingestion settings on the back end. No one cares about that. I'm just letting you know. That's why we started a little bit late. Regardless, I'm excited about tonight's show because our guests tonight are people that I've known about for years, have been fascinated by for years, have been wanting to get on the show for a long time.
Yes.
And finally, recently, at a local 15-mile race for me, a 50K for one of our guests tonight. He was running the Bridle Trails 50K loop. I was running the 15-miler, and I came up behind him. I was like, oh my God, that's Ras Vaughan. I need to talk to him about joining the show. And I was like, Ras, do you and Cathy want to come on the show? And he's like, yeah.
I hope you just actually ran up to him just being like, oh my God.
Oh my God. Well, it was one of those it was nighttime, and I was coming up behind him and just like, hey, my name is Ethan. I do the Ginger Runner. I'm a big fan. I've been following you for a long time. Would you want to come on our show? I kind of had to cover everything. Regardless, he was very gracious. He and Cathy decided to join us tonight, very graciously taking some of their time out, as are you, our viewers. So sit back, relax. We have a great show all about the Up North Loop, the UltraPedestrian North Loop, featuring Ras and Kathy Vaughan. It's going to be a great show. Sit back, relax. Here we go. Ginger Runner. Yes, what is up?
Sorry, somebody's saying they have no sound, so I just want to make sure it's just one person. I think it's just one person.
Is it just one person?
I think so.
Okay. Because we had a sound issue last week starting the show off. I want to make sure that we start the show off correctly this time. If there's an issue, it's my fault. I take full blame. Welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 246. So excited about tonight's show. So excited. It has been a snowpocalypse here in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle. Specifically, it is all over the news. I get it. People from the Midwest and around other cities that get snow regularly.
They think we're adorable.
Cute. We got that on Monday. We get it. Seattle gets it. But the thing is, Seattle is a rain city. So when it snows here, it changes everything. The roads become a mess. Traffic becomes a mess. We live on hills. The city is made of hills. So it becomes a big deal. We have a foot of snow outside right now.
We have a foot of snow at our house right now, yes.
Yeah, in Seattle, in the city. So that's crazy for us. I skied my backyard today.
You did.
That's legitimate.
And another skier skied by our house while we were outside.
This is true. He was looking for sick lines around this. He's like, I'm thinking about going down, what did he say, Columbia City tonight, doing laps. I'm like, this is a weird conversation, but that's what's going on in Seattle. So we're enjoying the snow. Our guests tonight are two adventurers, ultra runners. They are very passionate about the outdoors and challenging themselves, both body and mind, in a very unique way. And I can't wait to talk to them about a recent adventure that they spent 176 days of 2018 accomplishing. It is bonkers. Over 2,600 miles connecting what they're calling the Up North Loop, or the UltraPedestrian North Loop, which is just this brilliant concoction of trail miles, incorporating the Idaho Centennial Trail, the Oregon Desert Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Pacific Northwest Trail, covering Idaho, Oregon, Washington, I believe a little bit of Montana, and Nevada as well. So they covered 5 states in their 176 days out there. Ras and Kathy Vaughan are on the show tonight, UltraPedestrian team. They're going to talk to us all about this adventure, which is amazing. Not only are they joining us, and I am here, but also Kim.
I'm also here.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Great.
I'm doing well. As you guys know, we are live. There's lots of chit chat happening in the chat room. Lots of people talking about Tiger Claw registration opening tomorrow morning.
Haven't even talked about that yet.
A lot of people talk about the snow in their area. Everybody's just excited that the show is up and running now.
Yeah, good. And everyone can hear us okay?
Everyone can hear us okay. I think Wing was just going to reboot his browser, his computer, wherever he's watching. Yes. Everybody else is saying sound is great.
Yes.
So just a reminder, you guys, we are live. So if you have questions for our wonderful guests, please pop them into the chat room.
I do not foresee a shortage of questions because these two individuals they have a wealth of knowledge and experience out there pushing themselves. And I think we can learn a lot from them. So if you have questions, drop them in. We'll get to as many during the main show here and some additional in the after show. We briefly just mentioned it here. I'm going to briefly mention it before I thank our Patreon supporters. But yes, registration for our very first trail race that we are directing opens tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. It's called Tiger Claw. It takes place on a mountain nearby called Tiger Mountain, which I know our guests are very familiar with. Mm-hmm. It is a beast of a race. It's 22 miles with 8,200 feet of gain. It's based off of 3 different summits, 3 different loops that you get to choose the order of, which is pretty cool.
Choose your own adventure
Choose
style.
your own adventure.
Yeah.
RunTigerClaw.com is where all the info is. Registration opens tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Do not miss out. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's my plug. Patreon supporters are the reason this show is able to happen week in, week out. So big shout out to our Patreon supporters of all levels. They are the reason that we can do reviews, films, races, and this live show every single Monday. So thank you very, very much. 3 individuals in particular at that top tier really help make these things happen, and we like to shout them out at the beginning of every show. Chris Lee in Hong Kong with his organization Trailblazer. They showcase the local trails there. Amazing organization. He's a great human. Also directed his first race in 2018 called a Can Run. They'll be doing one in 2019. Huge success. A lot of local celebrities participated. It was really cool to follow. Rick Bjarnason and his team at cheekymonkeymedia.ca. They're a web design company. They redid all fancy like the gingerrunner.com website. You can go there right now. Check it out. It's fancy. It's shiny. Go enjoy it.
It's pretty.
Go spend some time scrolling and clicking and enjoying that. So big shout out to Rick, who's also an ultra runner, training for some big stuff coming up. Big shout out to him. And finally, Brian Sands, who is fresh off the Rob Krar Ultra Camp buzz in Arizona this last weekend. Brian is just crushing it right now, training for his first 50 miler, which is coming up. So big shout out to Brian for supporting us for so long. All right. Without further ado, I'm just going to get right to it because they've been waiting so patiently. Our 2 guests tonight are amazing. They've accomplished so much out on the trail, pushing themselves, both their mind and their body, coming to us also from Washington, but we'll find out how much snow they have. I bet it's more. I bet they have more snow than we do. They're like 12 inches.
Cute.
So that's cute. Ras and Kathy Vaughan.
Yay! All right.
Thank you for such a nice introduction.
Of course.
We have a lot of snow, but maybe not more than Seattle has right now. We're on Whidbey Island. We've been out skiing, so there's enough to ski. But a foot, you think?
I don't think we have a foot. Yeah. I mean, until just a couple of years ago, we lived on the east side of the mountain, so we're used to feet of snow and to living and driving and running and playing in snow for like 5 months out of the year. So for this, we're just like, shut it down. A week of snow, that's great. You know. By the way, on your race on Tiger, what were the numbers on that? Did you say 22 miles and 8,000 plus feet of? That's brilliant. I love that you are making people climb 8,000 feet, but not letting them get ultra distance.
Yeah.
Just adds insult to injury.
That was exactly it. I mean, that was the whole goal with the race was, listen, I want our ultra runners to come and just get their ass kicked, but I also want those who haven't run an ultra yet to come and get their ass kicked. So it's kind of this good ass kicking for everybody. And it also doesn't keep people out there overnight and stuff like that. Yeah. You and I can talk about it after the show because I feel like you'll go, I've run those trails like 1,000 times because I know you've done the ISSI 100 and all that sort of stuff. All right, so it's exciting to have you guys on the show. A part of me is like, where do I begin? Because you guys have been in this for so long. When did you get really into the ultra distances? Just your untypical fare going beyond that 26-mile marathon sort of distance. When did you really start dipping your toes into the extreme distances? And we can answer this, both of you, because I'm sure your stories are a bit different in that sense.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a great question. I don't know if I can even remember when I ran my first ultra marathon, maybe 7 years ago.
Okay.
But it goes back to almost 20 years ago when we did our first through hike on the Wonderland Trail around the base of Mount Rainier, where I was 265 pounds at the time. I was very much what you would call indoorsy. I couldn't hike for 2 miles without being bent over on the side of the trail with back spasms. And I don't know why, but for some reason, Cathy she said, well, hey, why don't we as a family hike this 93-mile trail with our 7-year-old daughter? I don't know why she thought we could do it, but she was right. We could do it. And while we were out there, we saw trail runners, and that was kind of the first time we saw that. And so all these things clicked for us, and we realized that like that's where we want to be, is on the trail, moving through beautiful and challenging places. That's like where we feel alive. That feels like the real world. And then we saw these people, and we're like, wow, can you imagine like getting a 30-mile serving of trail in a single day? You know, to me, it's kind of like eating pizza. Like there are some people that like take one slice and eat it with a knife and a fork very daintily and savor every bite. But I was always more that sort of dude, as you can tell from 265, to sit down and eat a whole family-sized pizza on my own in a serving. And to me, that's kind of what ultra distance is like. But when I got into running, that was what immediately fascinated me when I saw my first articles in Trail Runner about people running 100-mile races. And I just remember thinking, well, I can't do that. That's definitely not something I could do. But I tried a 25K at first, the Spokane River Run, which is a really fun run. The 50K is great too, but that was my very first race ever. And I surprised myself by being able to do it. And then I think I did the Sunflower Marathon and the Met How. And then James Varner's Sun Mountain 50K was my first 50K. And then there were all these question marks. Like each time I'd come to this question mark, like, can I run, 25K? And I'm like, no, probably not. And then it turned out I could. So then I'd find a new question mark. So then the question mark was, okay, I can do 50K, 50 miles. Turns out I could. 100 miles, I doubt it. Turned out I could. And then I heard about Von Fawn putting on the Pigtails Challenge, the first 200-mile ultramarathon. And I'm like, well, I certainly can't do that. I better sign up. And that's just how it happened. And then it just kept expanding from there and sort of blurred into through hiking and fast packing and just all these areas where it gets kind of hard to tell what you're doing. And that's really what I enjoy, is those gray areas.
What about you, Cathy? Yeah.
I started trail and ultra running about a year after Ross had gotten into it. I'd always been into hiking and done some backpacking trips in my early 20s, but yeah, I was 44 when I started ultra running around my first 50K, which was the Baker Lake 50K. And kind of like Ross, just kept trying longer and longer distances. I'm a back of the packer. I'm not fast at all, but I love to just grind out the really long distances. And that's pretty much what led into our first through hike, which was on the Arizona Trail. And that's an 800-mile trek. We did that in 2013, I think. And it was just that desire to spend more time on the trail than just even an overnight run. And it's really just kind of gone from there. After we did one stretch of the Arizona Trail, the 800-mile stretch, we decided, hey, why not try to yo-yo it? That'll keep us out on the trail even longer. And then we kind of created this desert yo-yo goal. We wanted to hike 3 desert trails and yo-yo all of them. And so we yo-yoed the Arizona Trail.
Right. And
then we went after the Grand Enchantment Trail, and about 300 miles shy of completing that yo-yo, which was, again, an 800-mile trail, so 1,600 total. We got to about 1,300 miles, and just a bunch of things kind of compiled, and we had to jump off the trail. We weren't able to finish it. So then we decided to switch around our goals. We weren't going after the desert yo-yo anymore. And that's when we came up with the Up North Loop, this latest long hike that we did.
I know your audience is kind of running centric, so I'd like to tell a story on Cathy that I don't think has ever been told before. But so I got into running first, and at first she went to a couple races and didn't even want to go interact with people, because she just kind of belonged here. I mean, it can be daunting when you're new, right? And that was it. And she finally started running with me a little bit, and she would do 3 miles on the road outside our house. And for a long time, 3 miles was it. Like, we'd be out running, we'd be heading back toward the house, and I'd be like, hey, let's just tag on an extra quarter of a mile. And she'd go, no, and turn up the driveway. It just fascinates me, because now she's completed 150-mile races and 2,600-mile through hikes. But there was this time when 3 miles was like this absolute cutoff. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's one thing that's really kind of drawn me to both of you, is this sense of, I mean, again, just kind of following and reading what you guys are posting with photos and kind of following your adventures and race reports and stuff like that, there's a real sense of love of the outdoors, and just your experience for you is living. Like, you are living when the second you step out your door and you're out amongst the trees and on the trail. And I love that. And knowing that your stories are so relatable is also what is appealing to us to have you on this show. As much as it's running centric, it's also much more about the love of the outdoors and the respect of the outdoors and what you can do within your body and within your mind. Just going through both of your resumes that you kind of mentioned there, like, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you decided to yo-yo some of these trails. Like, this is such a big component of what you guys have been doing. It's not just so much, hey, we just completed a 700-mile desert trail, which is
a giant deal.
Feat, but it's, we're done. Let's go back the other direction. So that's amazing. Looking back, not being able to run even down the driveway, and now looking at what you're doing, are you amazed? Are you surprised? Or is it this natural evolution that you're proud of, or do you even think about it so much? Cathy, we'll start with you, because I know both of you kind of have a similar sort of growth.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's a natural progression, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that progression. It's kind of living in the now and going from one goal to the next and building on that. I guess it kind of boggles my mind to think about it at times, but for the most part, it just feels like the natural way to kind of build on what I started back a number of years ago.
But you, Ras?
And I often am kind of surprised that I'm able to do something, or that we are, but the way that we take on these projects, it has to do with looking at something and kind of breaking down these big, impossible seeming goals until they're made up of small enough pieces that we can make all those little pieces possible and then reassemble them into a possibility. So before we do something, I always feel like we've determined that it is indeed humanly possible. And then it's just a matter of figuring out if we're the humans that can do it. So I am often surprised that we are those humans, but not that people can. I mean, our term UltraPedestrian, I know most people, runners and hikers, when they first hear it, they're thinking, okay, ultra, like big distance pedestrian, moving on 2 feet. And it means that, but it also has a second meaning if you parse the terms, because pedestrian can mean commonplace or lowbrow. So UltraPedestrian can also mean exceedingly commonplace. And I love that that's a second meaning of this term we made up, because it's really not saying, look at the cool stuff we do, we're so exceptional. It's actually saying, look at the cool stuff we do, we're so ordinary. All of you can do stuff like this too. Like that's really what we're fascinated by, is the amazing and extraordinary things that ordinary human beings are capable of, if you'll pardon me dangling a participle.
I am like so bummed that we haven't had them on 245 episodes ago, just because the whole premise of Ginger Runner was the exact same thing. It was taking the elitism out of a sport that I always viewed as elite and out of my own reach, because I'm not winning races. I 1000% will never. It's like I find myself in the middle or back of the pack, and have always. And that's part of the whole idea of Ginger Runner, was to break down what we thought impossible and just attempting it. And it's been this really interesting road over the last few years. I can only imagine even more so for you guys, because I look at what you guys do. I'm like, I would never be able to do even just the PCT, even just the PCT. I look at that and go, oh, I couldn't do it. The distance maybe each day, but it's the remoteness, the danger. Not that there's danger, but that fear that your mind creates. That's a big hurdle for someone who's just ultra running to overcome. I want to talk about that.
You could do it. You totally could do it. That fear. You would reach a point very quickly where you realize that this is actually your natural environment. When you're out in the woods, out in the desert, out on the trail, and you would learn to channel your inner, in your case, ginger squatch.
I love it. Now I gotta get one of those back here somehow. I do want to remind everyone that, of course, we are live with Ras and Kathy Vaughan, and Kim has been pulling tons of questions from the chat room over. So let's get to some of those, and we'll start talking about the Up North Loop.
Yeah, we just have a comment from Mark Griffith from early on. Mark says that he met you guys both at Deception Pass 50K. They volunteered at aid stations, were super chill and super nice. Kathy fed me glasses of pickle juice. So maybe you guys saved Mark's race. I'm not sure.
Awesome.
Well done.
Very nice. Super cool. Hey, thanks for being out and running, Mark, because if there's not runners out there, you look pretty creepy just setting up a table of treats out in the woods waiting for
pickle juice.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, what are you guys offering out here? Pickle juice. Pickle juice and chips.
Question from Kim Wrinkle in the chat room. Kim asked a question for you both. What co-adventure has been the most memorable for the two of you? Which was the most challenging?
Probably this, for me, I would say this last loop that we did together, it was the longest period of time that we'd been out and the longest distance that we'd covered together. And for me, it was really the most memorable, the most impactful. We're still absorbing everything that happened out there and all of the experiences we had, all the beauty we saw, all the struggles. And for me, it's still the most memorable. I'm still kind of grounding out from it. And we've been back since the second week of November. So.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the Up North Loop was just so incredible. It's hard to even put into words, but doing this gigantic loop and never leaving the Northwest and getting a comprehensive idea of how all these varied landscapes connect to one another is just it's an experience that's difficult to put into words, and it was so full of question marks. Like that's what I love. I really don't much enjoy a project where I feel solid the whole time and I perform well and I achieve my goals. I know that's kind of what everybody wants to do, but to me that's just kind of boring. I like my race plan is basically go out fast, blow up, and deal with the consequences, because that's what I enjoy, is that part, improvising when everything goes wrong. That's what's fascinating to me. But in that same vein, going back to our first Wonderland through hike, I faced so many question marks on that. Cathy was way more solid. I was so fat and out of shape, and every single day, like those were times when a 10-mile day was huge. We'd be like, okay, we're doing 10 miles in 2 days. You got to be ready for that. And like there were so many question marks in that trip that still is really resonant to me, because I can remember how difficult it was. And that's kind of where I fell in love with that, where thanks to Cathy, it awakened that within me, and there's just been no going back since then.
It just seems like this evolution, that the bigger challenges you create and the bigger obstacles you almost purposefully choose to put in your way, the challenges and stuff that you've given yourself in the past, do you now look at a 100-miler and go, yeah, that's a Saturday, that's fun, like as more like training for these bigger things? Do you even look at these 100s or 200s as a challenge at this point? Has your perspective changed, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. I mean, our perspective has definitely changed. I still really enjoy 200s. That's probably my favorite distance. Because 100, I mean, we can do a 100-mile ultra run without support. We can do it on our own and not have to have race infrastructure and pay entry fees and all of that. 200 is a fun distance where it really kind of makes sense to have some support if you're trying to do it fast or fast-ish, or push your own limits or whatever. So that I do find that fascinating. But yeah, there aren't as many question marks in supported races for us. So we do kind of use them more for training and just for the enjoyment too. I don't want to, there's always kind of a subset of people like that maybe use that as a cop out at a race. So I'm just using it as a training run for something else. And and I want to own that I perform poorly at races all the time. That's 100% me. So I'm not like fronting or faking on anything like that. But I enjoy the question marks of unsupported projects where everything can go just completely wrong and there's nobody to hand you a cup of pickle juice.
I think that's part of the key to the Up North Loop too. So I want to find out the origins of this thing. Why did you choose to connect these specific trails? What was the line? What was the project that came to mind? when you created this thing. So again, it's the Up North Loop, the UltraPedestrian North Loop. I believe the only known time is U2. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Crazy. So let's go ahead and start talking about the creation of this thing, because it's mad.
The Oregon Desert Trail we had been looking at as part of this desert yo-yo triple crown that was one of our goals. And so we'd been looking at the Oregon Desert Trail and wanting to hike through that area. And we'd also spent quite a bit of time looking at the Pacific Northwest Trail and studying that and wanting to hike that. We've lived, when Ross mentioned earlier that we lived over in North Central Washington, we lived and spent a lot of time running and hiking on the Pacific Northwest Trail over in that area. And now here on Whidbey Island, we're near the Fort Evie State Park and Deception Pass State Park, both which the PNT passes through. So we have had our minds on both of those trails. And then when you look at the map, all the long trails in the country, you can see the Oregon Desert Trail. You can see that it connects to the Pacific Crest Trail and then on up to the PNT and then over to Idaho, and you hit the Idaho Centennial Trail. So the loop just kind of popped out at us. And the main thing that we needed to figure out was a connection between the Oregon Desert Trail and the PCT and the Idaho Centennial Trail and the Oregon Desert Trail. And Renee Patrick, who works for the Oregon Natural Desert Association, had actually created these GPS tracks, but never hiked them herself. No one had ever hiked these. So there it was. The tracks were all put together, and we decided we'd go jump on board and see if we could do it. We started in Oregon on the Oregon Desert Trail, thinking that it would be easiest to get through that section in the spring. We started May 14th and wanted to get through some of that desert terrain before the heat really hit. And then we hit the PCT and covered about 660 miles of that during the gist of the summer, the main summer months, July, August. And then by late summer, we had hit the PNT and started heading east till we hit the Idaho Centennial Trail. So there, go ahead if you want to tell about our inspiration for the route.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, we saw on that map showing all the long trails in North America that how those linked up, and the Oregon Desert Trail just kind of floated out there like this W that almost connected. And this is really kind of the way these projects go with us, is we'll have an idea and then often we'll kind of dismiss it, or we'll talk about it a little bit and then move on. And the idea will keep presenting itself over and over again. And that was one where I think almost as soon as we saw it, it took hold of us. I don't know if you remember, like back in the early days of the internet, when SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, had a program where you could download a program on your computer, and whenever you weren't using your computer,
they would use the processors,
the processing power, yeah.
Oh, I remember, because mine's going right now in the background.
So that's basically what my mind does, is once a project takes hold in my brain, whenever I'm not intentionally allocating resources to something else, it just defaults to chewing away at whatever that was. Yeah. And that was what the Up North Loop became. Like before, it didn't take very long. So I set that map as like my desktop on my computer. So every time I powered up, it'd be like, boom, a reminder. And we just were constantly talking about it and about how cool it would be. And at a certain point, we're just like, well, it looks like we're probably going to try this.
Yeah.
So
wow. When did that idea start to float around? Because planning for a 176-day journey, you don't plan this overnight. So did it start like in 2017? Did it start years ago?
It was about a year. I think it was really pretty close to a calendar year from when when one of us first mentioned it to the other to when we actually like started hiking.
Wow.
We got off the Grand Enchantment Trail and spent, I don't know, probably the summertime kind of unwinding from that. And I came off of it with some health issues. I had become a type 1 diabetic. My pancreas stopped producing insulin while we were out on the trail, or maybe even before that. It's kind of unclear as to when that started happening. But we got off the trail. Ross had a summer project that he did where he traveled to Madagascar to visit our daughter and did a big hike on the Drakensberg Traverse in South Africa. And when he got back from that, we just kind of started we didn't like being apart. He was gone for, I think, 2 months.
Yeah.
And we knew that we weren't really going to be doing separate projects like that were really long, that when we went out on our next adventure, it was going to be together. And so it was really at that point that we started figuring out, well, what's a long project we can do? Let's pull this loop together. And we called it the Up North Loop. Came to us pretty naturally, being that it was in the the inland Northwest and up in the northern area of the Pacific Northwest. So,
yeah. And it's, we've never through hiked the entirety of the PCT or the Continental Divide Trail or the Appalachian Trail. We haven't done any of the big three. We've been fascinated by and kind of specialized in these shorter, lesser known trails that don't have as much traffic, don't have as much trail angelry, don't have as much beta and data available online. And those have just been the sort of projects that capture our imagination. So this was really linking 3 of those together and then having the one section. I mean, the PCT through Washington has many of the hardest PCT miles on it. So it's a particularly resonant portion of the PCT.
Yeah.
It was also interesting to think about these trails because the PCT, it almost seems like the PCT is kind of the I-5 of these 4 trail combinations. All the other ones are more remote, less accessible. You don't have trail angelry, anything like that. That's kind of established itself on the PCT. So I imagine the PCT was both rugged and difficult, but also you would come to towns more frequently and that sort of thing. We do have some live questions. Of course, we want to get to those, and then we're going to start diving into this thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of a little side conversation here. Cathy, you just mentioned your diabetes. Ingen in the chat room had a question. Ingen wanted to know, I would love to hear how Cathy manages her blood sugar out there on these long adventures.
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely has some challenges to it. So I carried a kit of all my diabetic supplies, a slow acting and a fast acting insulin. And as the time went, I had to just kind of get started in it and see, okay, well, where are my blood sugars kind of settling? And I knew that I would need to use less insulin than I use at home when I'm not hiking 20 miles per day, because the hiking itself brings my blood sugar numbers down. So I wouldn't need as much insulin to keep those numbers down. So yeah, I just kind of jumped into it and I had to experience a few lows and have some fast acting glucose, some sugars that I could take in right away. But a lot of it was trial and error, for sure. And as we changed from one section to the next, and changed into different elevations, different climates, my numbers would kind of fluctuate again, and then I'd have to bring them back into control. So it certainly wasn't easy. It was doable. I would have to deal with issues like this at home and not on the trail. So I figured I'm just going to see what it's like and see if I can do this. And I came off the trail really healthy, but it's definitely a combination of having, following kind of a low carb type diet when my numbers are running high, and then being able to take in some higher carb foods when my numbers are running too low.
And, for people that don't know, it's a challenging tightrope that she walks, especially on an adventure like this, because long-term having high blood sugar has health consequences. I mean, basically every day that you're running high blood sugar numbers, you're shaving time off of your life expectancy. But low blood sugar can be almost instantly fatal. So it's not that you just have to keep your blood sugar down. You also have to keep it up to a degree. And we had a couple of times where we were doing these long sections without resupply into areas that have with no other hikers, very little even road traffic. People didn't even know what hikers were. They couldn't tell that we weren't just homeless people with big packs, there were a couple times that we were literally out of food and on that final day trying to make it to town, and she was taking no insulin because she didn't even have any calories to take in. Wow. And one of those days, just about 5 miles short of Lakeview, we were completely out of food. We didn't have a calorie in either of our packs.
And a couple hard candies, which are 5 grams of carbs a piece, not really enough to bring my blood sugar up to.
And she
safe level.
And she was having a low blood sugar incident, had to just like sit down on the side of the road. And I went over and harassed these two giant land yachts that people had set up nearby and basically bummed an apple off of them to give to her. And I had to fight for it too. It surprised me, but you'd think somebody in a $250,000 vehicle would be like, oh, you need an apple? But I like had to like present an argument and even start to walk away from this one guy. And finally his wife is like, here, if she needs an apple. So they did help us, but it wasn't like easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine that. Like, there's already so many challenges with a project like this that you probably plan for. So you're planning for long periods of time without resupply, long distances, just wearing on the body, days and days and days away from civilization, stuff like that. So to plan challenges, but then there's this, which is kind of a wild card. You can plan for it, but you can find yourself 5 miles from a town with low blood sugar, and I just can't even imagine having to deal with that. Has that the diabetes has it caused you to rethink some of these challenges, or has it encouraged just that even more so to take these sort of adventures on and to really just show that you can do it? You know, you can take control and you can still accomplish these great things.
I feel that like it really just encourages me to keep going at it, keep doing these things. Being active actually helps it helps all of our health, but it certainly helps my diabetic health. As I was saying before, when I'm out hiking and being active or running, then that helps to keep my blood sugar numbers down at a more steady level. And I don't like using a lot of insulin, so I try to, when I'm just at home, normally just eating low carb so that I don't have to use insulin to cover the carbohydrates that I'm eating. So, just.
Oh, she's so humble. I mean, what you're saying is right. It's incredibly badass. I can't imagine taking on the Up North Loop if I was diabetic. And being that, to me, that's like one of the most amazing things about doing these adventures with her, is that it's an absolute honor to be there for every moment of it, and and see all of her struggles and how much planning she puts into it. I mean, she is just so meticulous with
it. Takes a lot of attention to detail for sure. And it's just something once I became diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, I knew that this was going to be a challenge every day. And so why not just keep living my life the way I want to, taking on these adventures. I climbed Mount Adams within the first month of my diabetes diagnosis. When I look back on that now, that is pretty scary because I still had so much to learn about what it meant to be a diabetic. I had a pretty serious low blood sugar at that time, but I was able to communicate with my doctor about that, and she really helped guide me to the changes that she totally encouraged and supported me to stay active and to keep pushing these goals and these challenges, but that there was going to be a safe way for me to do it. And so I started learning that if I'm going to run an ultra the next day, then I don't do any insulin at all the night before, and no insulin during the day that I'm running. And that's just what works for me. I think each diabetic, and depending on what kinds of foods they eat and what they're working with, might be different. But I just started learning right away and I'm always studying and learning about how to manage my diabetes in the best way that I can, on the trail or off.
It's we have friends who are diabetics who live very active lives, and it's one of those things where people get diagnosed, or people who maybe aren't familiar with it think it is a debilitating disease that keeps you from doing these things. But the people that we know and just hearing the story is like, if anything, it's encouraged these people to be more precise with everything that they do and enjoy the things that their life that they want to continue doing within their life. So as much as I'm listening to this going, oh, like terrifying, I can't even imagine that day and that moment specifically. How did you plan ahead for those types of moments? Like, so even for you, Ras, like knowing that you are also going to be there if Cathy starts having low blood sugar or high blood sugar or some sort of issue, what were some of the conversations that you had in how to deal with these moments as they did arise?
Well, we each carried a glucagon syringe, which is something if she's having a low blood sugar, it can be in gel, or especially if she's passed out is when you would really use it. It can be injected. So she had one in her pack. I had one in my pack as well. She always would have to manage her foods and make sure that she had some simple carbs that could act quickly. And so I also had a little kit in with a glucagon. Whenever we'd hit a resupply town, I would stash some things away and usually not even tell her about it. So I'd have some gels, some Smarties. Sometimes I'd intentionally choose something, like a candy treat that wasn't really palatable.
Like the Idaho Spud.
Yeah.
Those are awful.
But, something that wouldn't be tempting to eat, but that would do the job in an emergency. It adds another level of challenge to these adventures. I'm realizing I mentioned SETI and where I'm going now. I need to update my cultural references, but do you remember the Tamagotchi toys?
The little toys?
Japanese, right?
I have one in the background working on SETI right now.
But I mean, her diabetes, it's almost like a Tamagotchi, except that if it dies, she dies. But if you think about those toys and how easy it was to let them die, but you just had to push a few little buttons a few times a day, and it's like that. She has to, a few times a day, make sure to take care of this little chore, and she's got to have the needle, she's got to have the syringes, she's got to have both types of insulin. It's, in some ways it's simple, but it's also a really big deal. Like just taking anything else you want to do in life and adding another challenge to it that's potentially fatal is crazy. It's, there's still a part of me that's very angry at the universe about that this even happened to her. She had a growth encapsulating her pancreas 10 years ago that they had to remove 40% of her pancreas. And that's why it eventually stopped producing insulin. But, and I don't mean to sound ungrateful. I'm so grateful that she survived that. She had major surgery. This is before she was even a runner, So she had major surgery, had a good portion of her pancreas removed. And that's a miracle that we're both thankful for every day. But man, it just hurt me on a level I can't express when she then became diabetic. It's just like, really? Like, why this? Why another thing for this amazing woman? But
I knew at the time when I had the surgery that my pancreatic health could progress, deteriorate or progress to this point where becoming a diabetic would be a result. So even though, on the Grand Enchantment Trail, when I started really having the symptoms of being type 1 diabetic and needing the insulin therapy, I still didn't really put 2 and 2 together. I just thought, well, we're working hard, so I've lost weight. I'm thirsty all the time because we're in the desert and I'm working really hard. My gums are bleeding because, we're just out on the trail. So I haven't seen a dentist in a while, and I'm, so all of the symptoms really had not shouted to us yet that I had become a diabetic. So yeah, it's been a process.
It is inspiring. We have a lot of people in the chat room, even Don here. Do you want to?
Yeah, Don Clark in the chat room just has a comment. Don says, "This hits home for my family. My oldest son is diabetic. Thank you for sharing this. I'll be sure to share this with him."
Nice. Yeah.
I obviously want to start transitioning into continuing with the conversation of badassness. So this accomplishment, 2,600 plus miles, this incredible loop of very remote and not frequently trafficked trails around the Northwest here through these 5 states. What were some of the highlights? I know that over 176 days of travel by foot, there were thousands, if not at least 1 or 2 very wonderful moments. But what were some of the most memorable moments for both of you on this incredible adventure? If we can maybe distill down to a couple ideas, I'd love to hear some of these.
Ooh, man, it's so hard to say. I mean, yeah, we'll come up with 1 or 2. Like every time we see a horned lizard, we're stoked. Like it's funny. It doesn't even have to be big things. Like every time time we see a horned lizard, it's like, honey, a horned lizard, and we like stop and talk to it and watch it take, or rattlesnakes. Like, we love that. We just love encountering the other creatures that live in these areas. It feels like such an honor and a blessing to be able to pass through, and whether it's in Arizona and you're seeing your first javelina, or it's the deserts of Oregon and you see a pickup truck in the distance and you're like, look, signs of life, hon. It's been 2 weeks since we saw the person. Like, that aspect of it is always fascinating to me. It's real. Like, there were just crazy ridges that we walked with the wind trying to blow us off, and at one point, trying to avoid that, we descended into wildfire that was still burning that we didn't realize.
That's
was
right.
still going.
That was in the North Cascades?
No, that was in Idaho.
Idaho.
Yeah, Idaho. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we were near some fires there, but we were hiking this ridge, and because of how we came into the area, it was signed, but we didn't see the warning signs because we were on this ridge and high winds came up, and we bushwhacked down off of that into what we thought was a burn from maybe a year or two ago. But as the sun went down, we started seeing, the hot spots that were still burning not all that far away from us. Man. And so we eventually were able to find a spot on an abandoned roadbed where there was a big enough spot to fit our tent, and we could clear away the bear scat and elk droppings.
Huge piles of bear scat, looking more like grizzly than a black bear for sure.
Yeah, and it was like dog's hair saplings, difficult to move through. So obviously the clear spot we found where our tent would fit was on the trail that all the bears and everything were using, because it was one of the only places you can move through. And then in the morning, that road we were following just took us right toward these fires. And so we were actually clambering over charred logs that were still smoldering, still had coals.
God.
But then we followed this road down, and I'm just using like my phone and the GPS. We're making up the route at this point. We weren't on the Idaho Centennial Trail anymore at that point. We're just trying to get somewhere. And all of a sudden we saw like some people moving ahead of us, and we're like, what? And so we realized they were hunters. It was like 3 hunters, and it's like, okay, these are like armed dudes out in the woods, and they're not going to be expecting somebody coming up from behind them. This might not be a great situation. But at a certain point, they kind of went around a curve and looked back, and one of them saw me, and I'm like, hi, human being, not a Sasquatch.
Not a deer or bear.
Yeah. So, and they were actually really cool, and they let us down and talked to us the whole way. And they're like, you're doing what? You came from where? You've been out here how long? Showed us a shortcut down to the road, gave us a couple of beers. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I want to tell you about all these crazy places we saw, but what I found so cool over and over again was our interactions with hunters in Idaho. Because I don't know if people can see, but I mean, I've got dreadlocks down to my ankles, basically. So I'm not necessarily the guy that Idaho hunters are expecting to meet, and I don't know how many people like me they have in their social circles per se, but over and over again, the hunters were so kind to us. It was amazing. And that was actually one of my very favorite things about the Up North Loop, was meeting hunters in these crazy spots and having their minds blown and our minds blown, and like realizing like, wow, we're doing different things out here, and yet we're really similar people. We love the same things about this, and that's why we're bumping into each other out here.
We hit northern Idaho right in the throes of hunting season, and Idaho has this reputation of being a hunting area, and it met up to that reputation 100%. We started, up in the upper Priest Lake region of northern Idaho, which is absolutely gorgeous. There's ancient cedar groves up there. We heard elk bugling off in the distance. It's just an absolutely gorgeous area of the state. And within just a few days, we started seeing hunting camps just everywhere. We ran into outfitters leading their horses, their pack animals along the trail. It was just what was happening in Idaho at that time. It would have been hard to avoid seeing hunters. And each interaction we had with different groups of hunters were so positive and so awesome. We're vegetarian, and that didn't matter at all. Two guys that were in a pickup truck when we were doing a long road walk in the pouring rain along the St. Joe River in Idaho, they passed us one time and kind of waved and were friendly. And then they came by us a second time and waved again. But by the third time, it had gotten dark. We were using our ultralight umbrellas, for the rain rather than the sun. And they decided they just had to stop and figure out what the heck we were up to. People don't see hikers around Idaho. The PCT is where people see hikers. And
right.
And they might have even said to us, "You're pretty far from the PCT, aren't you?" But as it turned out, they were guides up in Alaska and had taken groups through the Brooks Range, and were just so interested in what we were doing. They had a huge moose in the back of their truck. Their truck was splattered with mud and blood from the moose, and it was a really kind of gnarly scene. It was dark, and they hopped out of their truck, and we talked for about a half hour. It was so fun. They got their cooler out of the back of their truck and opened it up and said, "Please take anything you want." So we grabbed a couple cold drinks. They gave us their snacks, and one guy was from Montana and gave us his special Montana huckleberry flavored licorice.
Right.
And we had nothing but positive experiences with these groups of hunters, and we were able to kind of show them a little bit about what thru hiking is, and they had a lot of interest in what we were out doing and what kind of gear we used.
Yeah.
What it comes down to, it doesn't matter whether it's scorpions or rattlesnakes or hunters. We could have come in with an attitude, but we didn't want to. We make a point of that. That's part of our approach, is that we're guests, we're visitors. Yeah. We're passing through areas where other people and creatures live, and it's an honor to be allowed to experience those places. So, I wouldn't necessarily go out with some guys on a moose hunt. I mean, maybe, probably not. Yeah, it's hard to say 100%. And I mean, I would love to see a moose, so I don't necessarily want to see it in pieces in the back of a truck, but that was actually cool too. When do you get to look at a moose like this far away? I mean, I respect what they were doing. So rather than buying their meat on a piece of styrofoam in the store, they're going out and putting up the meat for their family. I can respect that. And they were kind enough to let us take a look at the moose, to stop and say hi and care about what we were doing, and to offer us hospitality and share food and beverages and stuff with us. I mean, what more could we have asked? I mean, that's as kind and as hospitable as we could ask for anybody to be.
And by the time we got to Idaho, it was getting pretty late into the season. We were definitely hitting fall weather, snow, cold, wind, and had to do some rerouting. We had to come down off the high country, like Ross was saying earlier, when we came down off the state line ridge trail that divides Idaho and Montana, and we kind of got literally blown off of that trail. And it was really at that time that we realized if we were going to finish this loop off, and we'd already been out there for so long, so we were determined to finish it, that we needed to reroute. We needed to find some lower country to hike through, and these hunters became a tremendous resource for that. They know the area, they know the trails, the dirt roads, through all of that, and it was really awesome to get that information from them and find out ways that we could continue our hike, continue finding a route that made sense to us, that still we followed the Nez Perce Trail and the Lewis and Clark Trail. Those were times that we got off the Idaho Centennial Trail, so we weren't on the original route that we wanted to follow, but we were able to find interesting ways to continue to travel along the loop, without compromising.
Like adapting. It seems like your plan had to have that sort of level of flexibility to adapt.
Yeah.
Wing Taylor and
most of our original plans went out the window.
Right. Especially with something like this, when the plan, I mean, it's such a big plan that you part of the plan is to be flexible and let the plan evolve. Wing Taylor in the chat room brings up a great point. We had Ricky Gates on the show a while back after he ran across America. He anticipated those he would encounter in certain parts of the country to treat him a certain way, or, he had these preconceived notions of how people's behavior was. And he found that human to human, it was a completely different experience. He's like, I was welcomed into people's homes, onto their front porches, to their dinner table, to their extra bedrooms. It was kind of this evolution of his own mind, kind of realizing, human to human contact is a completely different scenario than what a prediction or what social media or online tells us.
Yeah.
So true.
And that's kind of what I anticipated too. Hearing in my mind, I'm going, oh, I wonder what it would be like to encounter hunters in Idaho trying to get their prize moose or something, like just coming up on them in trail running gear or that sort of thing. Would they like, I don't want anything to do with this duo coming out of the woods? But it sounds like it was just the complete opposite. It was very welcoming, and I love the concept of gear. Gear ties people together. Outdoor people love gear. It doesn't matter if hunting or hiking or running. I love that. I love it.
Yeah. We had to hit one of the most remote areas of Idaho. We had to kind of go around, like we were talking about, doing our rerouting. And we had to hit this place called the Wilderness Gateway Campground, which is super, super remote. And we were able to contact some friends of ours that are ultra runners that lived in Idaho. We didn't know exactly how close they were to the Wilderness Gateway, but we had to get some supplies brought to us there. And so Ross took a chance, called our friend John Reese, who we know through running ultras, and he agreed to drive 4, maybe 5 hours to bring our resupply box to us. Wow. My mom sent him the box. She was holding it at her house, so it was kind of complicated. And they waited there for us for, I think, 24, maybe 36 hours. We were up on the Lolo Trail following the Lewis and Clark Trail and got completely snowed in and struggled and to get down to the campground. By the time we got there, they had to leave. So they left the box with a group of hunters and left a note for us on this bulletin board that we would see as soon as we hit the Gateway Campground. And we saw the note and it said, "Your box is at a hunting camp." And I thought, oh no.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, here we go. And Ross went down there first, walked down and checked it out. And it was a really cool scene, but he couldn't carry the box down to me. It was a whole bunch of gear. And John and his wife, Carrie, had left us a lot of extra things too that they knew we would appreciate having. So we walked down there and it was super cold. We were all bundled up and really bedraggled and just really feeling it. And they just welcomed us in. There were probably 30 people there, all ages, children running around, older guys. And by the nighttime, after they showed us a place we could go set up our tent. We set up our tent and they invited us back to join them around the fire. And one of the hunters had gotten an elk earlier in the day. And this is when the gear talk really started happening. It was just so fun. Everyone gathered around and, they wanted to know everything about all of our gear. And we got to hear stories about their gear and how they'd carried, had to butcher the elk up in the wilderness and carry it down. It took 3 days to carry it out. So just fun times for sure. And we had experiences with ranchers and cowboys and buckaroos in the Oregon desert. So all along the route, we really met, people that were living their life in their environment, and we got to walk right through and experience that with them and see how they live. Very, very fun, a way cool aspect of the loop.
I want to spend another hour.
I know.
Just sitting here
I just want to listen.
We're literally just scratching the surface. I can only imagine. I'm anticipating reading stories. Are you going to write this all out? Are you doing video series? What's the plan with basically everything as you start to download it? Now that you're just a couple of months out.
Yeah, we are writing a book. We have one book out about our Grand Enchantment Trail yo-yo attempt called 98 Days of Wind, the greatest fail of our life. And that was that's a collection of all of our social media posts. I mean, for years we've been doing these kind of interactive adventures where when we're out on our adventures, as often as we can, we're posting to our social media and posting photos and telling what exactly is going on, so that people can interact with us and actually kind of come along and be a part of it. And so we collected all of that, plus Cathy took copious journal notes throughout that project, and we were able to put that book together. So this time she took even more notes, wow. and did her journaling knowing that we were going to be writing a book about it. So we are writing a book about the Up North Loop. And I actually carried a GoPro with a Steadicam and shot a crazy amount of footage. And our original plan was to do vlogs from the trail as we were going. And we started to, and we attempted to, and had a lot of technical issues.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And we were so remote that it was hard to post those as we traveled. So that's something that we're going to be doing
hard
now.
enough with internet posting that stuff, like regular internet.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine.
Yeah. So I think we actually got 4 updates posted, or 4 videos posted from the trail. So if you go to our YouTube channel, they're actually on the Trek channel, but there's on a playlist on our YouTube channel as well. And we are going to be putting together and posting all the rest of those as well. And then we also, in April and early May, we're doing a speaking tour with a couple dates in Washington and Idaho, and then mostly in Oregon, because the Oregon Natural Desert Association is helping us organize it. So people that do want to hear stories, firsthand, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that. Starting April 4th at Seven Hills Running Shop in Seattle. That'll be
love
the
it.
first day.
Phil and our crew, I love it. So this is fascinating. If you are watching live right now, we got through some of the questions. There's still lots left. We are going to have Ras and Cathy join us for the after show for our Patreon supporters. So if you haven't already, consider joining us on Patreon, patreon.com/thegingernunner. From $1 on up, we do all of our after shows with our guests. And tonight we're going to have Cathy and Ras join us for just a little bit of that, and we'll get to some of these questions. But before we wrap up our main show here, I still just I have so many questions. I want to find out so much more. I can't. Well, we'll come to the Seven Hills talk for sure. One thing we do, since you guys are first-time guests, we have a little thing on the show called the Quickie Question Quiz. It's a rapid-fire series of 10 questions. Very easy. I think it's 10. I don't know what it is at this point. 9, 8, 10. Basically, what's going to happen is I'll ask them. You guys just give us the first answer that comes to mind. We'll go Cathy, then Ras, in order there. When you're both ready, give me a thumbs up, and we'll just start ripping through.
Okay, we're ready.
Nice. What was your very first race?
Baker Lake 50K.
And very first was Spokane River Run 25K.
Favorite place to run currently?
I'm gonna say Deception Pass State Park. I like to run in the Hoypus Forest over there and along the bluff trails.
Yeah, and Fort Eby State Park.
Nice. Road or trails?
Trails.
Bucket list race, or in your case, bucket list adventure?
That's hard. Hiking in Idaho again.
Nice.
Okay, bucket list adventure would be a through climb of the Cascade volcanoes, all connected on foot via trail.
I can see the SETI mechanism already working.
Oh, yeah.
Favorite running movie?
Good question. It's more of a hiking movie, Unbranded.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a kind of equestrian movie. Favorite running movie? That is...
Did I stump Ras?
This is horrible YouTube. Sorry about this.
This is always the hardest question.
Honestly, this is the hardest question.
Maybe Running the Sahara?
Yeah. We'll count it.
Just because of when I saw that. That was years ago when I saw that, and that I didn't know you could run across the desert at that time.
There you go.
So that opened my eyes.
This will be an interesting answer, and it's okay if you have to think about it or if you have to pass on it, but guilty pleasure TV show.
Easy for me.
I like watching the is it the adventure race? What's it called?
The Amazing Race.
Yeah, The Amazing Race.
Good choice.
Street Outlaws.
Yeah,
I know,
love it.
right?
There was no thought. It's like, I know, man. It's Street Outlaws.
I'm not even a car guy because I feel guilty when I watch it, but I freaking love it, and it's on tonight even.
We'll make sure to wrap this up.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up real quick.
No,
favorite pre-adventure meal?
Pre-adventure meal?
Yep, we'll do pre and then we'll do post.
Oh, no, that's a good question.
I mean, the difference is like these questions normally we ask racers, like, what's your pre-race meal? But in your case, it's like, what's the meal you have before you leave civilization for 176 days?
Oh. That's hard. Maybe pizza?
Pizza's a good one.
Yeah, or salad.
Uh-huh.
I know that doesn't
fresh
sound
vegetables.
Yeah, you know you're not going to have fresh vegetables for a long time. Salad is like, yeah.
Good call. So what's your favorite, what's the first thing that you eat as soon as you get back to civilization?
Oh, let's see. I love
Could also be salad.
type thing, like a salad bar with fresh salads and soups to choose from. Just tons of food.
Oh, you can eat buffet. For me, it's espresso and ice cream.
Yeah, that is his thing.
Like whenever we would, to me, those are like the two foods that kind of symbolize civilization, because you've got beans from Africa that are grown in South America that are harvested and dried and processed and flown, like there's these ingredients that are gathered from all over the world and processed and stored in these very specific ways. You can't have espresso and ice cream just anywhere.
Right.
So to me, though, that's what I'm always looking for. And sometimes it's just freaking, whatever. It's from a mini mart. It's not necessarily always high quality of either,
but I imagine it tastes incredible.
Yeah, it does.
And the final question is, what shoes did you wear for the Up North Loop?
I wore the Ultra Running Lone Peaks, and there's a number of different types of Lone Peaks out. So I started with just the basic Lone Peak 4.0, I think, or maybe the 3.5. And then by the end, I was in the mid height that had an insulated, that I think it's called the MSR, the mud, snow, and rock shoe.
It's rain, snow, and
we're supposed
they
to
just
know
changed it. It used to be called the Neo Shell, and now it's called RSM, or it's some combination. It's rain, snow, and mud.
Yeah, it worked.
But it's the insulated
basically
water.
We've been wearing those this week with the snow.
Okay,
It's perfect. Nice. Congratulations. Go. Sorry, Ras. Yeah.
Okay. I wore Lone Peaks and I wore the waterproof insulated ones, but there was a good chunk of trail when we were connecting to the Pacific Northwest Trail where I knew we'd be doing a lot of road walking, and so I wore Paradigms, the Ultra Paradigm, which is one of their, it's the stiffer of their Max midsole shoes.
Yeah.
And when it was outside where Angela, when we stayed with those folks, what town was that? In Idaho?
Oh, Sandpoint?
Yeah, I was outside Sandpoint. I switched from those back to the Lone Peaks and still had some road mileage. And I was like, oh my gosh, hon, you've been walking all this asphalt in Lone Peaks this whole time? Because it was a huge difference. The Paradigms are surprisingly good through hiking shoes if you're going to be on some hard pack stuff.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of PCT hikers come off some sections of the trail with the Paradigms. Ultra is obviously a very popular through hiking shoe, but the Paradigms, I'm like, that's brilliant. If you're not dealing with super techy stuff, if it's just kind of buffed out single track, it's perfect. Congratulations, you both passed our Quickie question.
Yay.
So just for our live viewers, remind them where they can find you on social media, because there's going to be tons of questions. People are going to want to follow this. Where can they find you guys? So YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff.
Yeah, Instagram, it's at UltraPedestrian. YouTube is UltraPedestrian channel. If you just Google UltraPedestrian, all one word, all of our stuff comes up. You'll find us. Twitter, I admittedly really need to up our Twitter game. It basically just reposts all our Facebook stuff. And every once in a while I remember about Twitter, and so if you want to mine for those little nuggets of unique Twitter content that I post every month or two, good luck with that. But mostly would be our personal Facebook profiles. That's where we post the most stuff. But of course, our website is ultrapedestrian.com. So be sure and hit that to see about the upcoming tour dates. There's a short film we're going to be releasing very soon about my adventure in Lesotho in South Africa last year. So the main place I would say is subscribe on our YouTube, because we have just hundreds of hours of content we're going to be getting up on our YouTube. Last year was supposed to be the year that we finally took our YouTube to the next level, and it ended up being a 2-year process on that.
Just do some great footage.
I can't wait.
Of some really cool. It'll show how varying the terrain is throughout the whole loop. So that's one of the really awesome things about it.
It's going to be super exciting. So you guys know the drill. Go subscribe to their YouTube channel, because that's talk about content that's going to be awesome to kind of follow along with. once again, thank you so much for tuning into Ginger Runner Live, episode number 246. We really appreciate it. And of course, if you guys want to support this show and tune into the after show in just a couple of seconds, patreon.com/thegingerrunners, where you'll find that for as little as $1 a month. You support everything that we do here, all of the videos, reviews, live shows, everything, including the new race that I've already talked about, Tiger Claw. You can go to runtigerclaw.com to find out how you can register tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Whew, boy, it's going to be a doozy. Every week, we started a new segment in 2019, showcasing some of our incredible viewers, the people who support this show, our audience. We want to highlight accomplishments by members of our community, really cool, badass accomplishments. We call it our Crew Member of the Week. And this week, we're very, very excited to announce our GR Crew Member of the Week. It is Wing Taylor. Congratulations, Wing. He's a regular viewer, longtime supporter of the show. But Wing was supposed to run the Orcas Island 100 miler this last weekend, as were many of our viewers, actually.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was canceled due to this crazy weather. The island had some of the craziest winds and snow, and it was devastating. A lot of the Moran State Park facilities ended up getting trees across them and roofs just shattered. So they had to cancel the event, rightfully so. But a lot of runners just ended up not having a race or event to do this weekend. Some came up with their own adventures. Wing Taylor decided to go run a road half marathon. He took that 100-mile training and put it to good use on the road. He PR'd his half marathon.
Nice.
Well done, Wing Taylor. You are our Crew Member of the Week for dealing with the circumstances, adapting, and finding a new challenge, and just crushing it. So way to go, my friend, and thank you for the longtime viewership. You're a great human, and congratulations on the new PR. Because half marathons, probably harder than running 100 miles on Orcas Island, let's be totally honest. Just takes its toll on the knees and stuff like that. We're going to move right into the after show with our wonderful guests, Ras and Cathy. If you have any residual questions, ask them there. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week for more Ginger Runner Live. Get out there, train hard, race harder. Harder the hardest. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so.
I don't either. We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, we have another 6 feet of snow. No? Is that wrong?
I would like that.
Same. Okay. Bye, guys.